A customer brought in their 1990 Ford Bronco ECU for us to try and fix. The issue the customer is experiencing is some rough idling and issues with the truck turning off. Now, they did state they've already opened the unit and they've noticed leaky caps, so they've requested that we recap the ECU for them. It looks like I have some T15 screws on the sides here. Let's see. So I'm looking at the back of the board to see if I can notice any damage, and I don't. I also don't see any signs of tampering, which is good news. It means the customer did not try to fix it themselves. All right, so on the front, let's see. The customer said leaky capacitors. Ah, I see it. We're going to switch over to the microscope. All right, looking at some of our electrolytic capacitors under the microscope, we can clearly tell there is a little bit of electrolytic fluid that's oozing out. So the customer was correct. It does look like we have leaky caps. So this one is a 47 microfarad 16 volt capacitor. We have another one over here. And I can also tell that one's got a lot of leaking electrolytic fluid there. Let's zoom in. Also a 47 microfarad 16 volt capacitor. So those will have to be replaced. And I have one last one over here. This one is a 10 microfarad 63 volt. So that is a much, much higher voltage rating. And looking at the board, it actually looks pretty good. I don't think this one's leaky. The fact that it has a 63 volt rating, that's a little bit high. I don't believe this ECU has more than 12 volts going through it. So what that tells me is that this is rated for a little higher than it needs to be. So it probably is less susceptible to breaking down over time. So I don't think this one's actually bad or needs replacement. We're gonna go ahead and measure it using our ESR meter though, just to be sure. So it's a little bit tough to make contact with my alligator clips. So I'm gonna be attaching some needles and we're gonna try and get some in-circuit measurements. And it does say either in-circuit or leaky, which is what we're expecting because it's both leaky and in-circuit. So we'll recheck them out of circuit, of course. This one's not measuring leaky or in-circuit. It's saying 39 microfarads and 29 ohms for the ESR, which is actually really high, and the microfarad is a little low. Let's check this last one, which we think might be good. Let's see what this one says. In-circuit leaky. All right, so what we'll need to do is we're gonna remove all three out of circuit, and then we will recheck them out of circuit. So on the back side, I believe this is going to be our capacitor right there. So there is a little layer of conformal coating here. We're going to have to try and break through. And I'm going to use my metal brush just to try and scrape away some of that top conformal coating layer real quick. Because I am having a hard time getting good contact with my iron. All right, let's try again. There we go, that's much better. All right, let's see if we can free these pins. Will that allow us to remove and free the capacitor? Not quite. So I'm actually noticing that it broke on the back end of things. And something else I will notice is that there is quite a pungent smell coming from this leaky capacitor, which is another way to confirm that it is leaky, is I can vividly smell that electrolytic fluid. So that more or less confirms that the issue is definitely due to the capacitor and not necessarily a in-circuit reading throwing off the reading. There we go. All right, so now that the capacitor is removed, let's try desoldering again. And I'm definitely having a hard time getting all of that solder to get removed. I got one side, but the other one's really giving me a hard time. So I got the majority of the solder out of the hole. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use this little Dremel drill to remove the rest that's still there. And so this is not going to damage the board in any way. I'm just removing the solder in the center of the hole, and I'm making sure that I'm not damaging the actual trace, of course. So now we'll be able to solder our replacements. Now the electrolytic fluid I think might be a little corrosive, so I just want to make sure I clean that off before we install our replacement capacitor. And that looks a lot better. Now let's go ahead and put our replacements. And the hole that was giving me a little bit of a hard time that I just had to drill out was our negative side. So of course I'm making sure I have the correct orientation on my replacements. We'll bend out the pins, cut off the leads, and add some fresh solder. All right, let's move on to the second one over here. All right, so for this one, it looks like this and this pin are gonna be the ones we need to desolder. So this time around, we're gonna start with our metal brush to remove some of that conformal coating or silicone, whatever sealing material they used. I'm actually going to rotate this, and the reason for is I want to start by desoldering the positive side, which is this one here. I want to lift the pin up. Actually, we're just going to do that to both sides. And instead of desoldering, we're going to go ahead and just flood both of the legs with lots of solder. And what I'm going to do is with my other hand, I'm going to pull the capacitor through as I melt both sides. There we go. That pulled through, and that should give me an easier time desoldering now, in theory. Still not able to get that hole cleared on the ground side. The positive side I should be able to. Typically that side has less, a smaller pad, and so is usually easier to desolder. And same thing, I can smell that electrolytic fluid. So that's another indicator that we definitely had a leak. Now if you recall, in circuit it actually was stating that there was no issues. It wasn't stating it was leaky or in circuit, but it was showing a lower than expected microfarad value and a higher ESR resistance than expected. All right, we're gonna recheck it out of circuit since this one was pulled out intact, and it is showing me, it's hard to tell, but 38 microfarads and 27 ohms ESR resistance. So we're definitely going to want to replace that. My ground side didn't desolder all the way, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to just drill out that center. Okay, push that through. So I'm bending the leads out. We're going to cut them, and now we can go ahead and solder. Let's do a quick cleanup, remove some of that flux that's embedded in our solder. And let's do the same to that other capacitor we did just a moment ago. Okay. And finally, we have our last capacitor here. So this one I'm going to be a little bit more careful because, again, I don't believe it's bad. I don't believe that it needs to be replaced. So we're going to do the same thing as the last one. We're going to go ahead and just try and pull it straight out. so that we can retest it out of circuit. So I'm straightening out the leads. So let's see, let me add just a little bit more solder to both sides. I'm getting some movement, but I'm having a hard time pulling it through. There we go. So I'm gonna try and desolder this as quickly as I can while the joints are still hot. And I should do that on camera, perhaps. Yeah, I was not able to get it. Oh, actually I did get it. It's just a little dirty, so it looks like I didn't. Yeah, I can go ahead and put our cap back in. All right, so the pads are good. Now in circuit, this one tested bad, but that was in circuit. So out of circuit, let's see. Am I correct? Is it actually okay? And this one is measuring 8.89 microfarads with 2.6 ohms of resistance. So to me, that's actually within tolerance, so we are okay. Now, typically I would like to preemptively replace it, but since it is in good condition and our customer is hoping to get this back very quickly, I don't actually have a replacement on hand. So we're gonna go ahead and put it back in. We'll make sure the customer is aware of this. And let's go ahead and solder back on. All right, we'll give that one more clean. All right, so the last thing I'm gonna do is actually add some conformal coating to seal up the work that we just did, and then we'll put it back together, have the customer try it out in their vehicle, and we will reconvene and confirm that everything's working. We did reach out to the customer. They have confirmed that all of their problems are now resolved, so that does confirm we have a successful repair. If you found the video helpful or useful, leave us a like, subscribe for more content, and thank you for watching.